Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Come through. Okay. Okay. Okay, welcome to the public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission of August 3rd, 2021. Chair Carroll. Here. Commissioner Bland. Here. Commissioner Chapin.
Here.
Commissioner Chen. Here. Commissioner Devonshire. Commissioner Goldblum. Here. Commissioner Gustafson. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Shamir Barron. Here. Commissioner Jefferson. Here.
Good morning and welcome to the August 3rd public hearing of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. We have a number of applications for proposed work to review today, and I'll turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala, to take us through the agenda today.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. We'll start today's Preservation Department public hearing agenda with item number 1, LPC 21-00012. This is an application for a binding report in the Borough of Queens, Block 129, Lot 30, 50-02 39th Avenue, aka Phipps Playground in the Sunnyside Gardens Historic District. This is a quarter-acre fenced-in playground with a shed and pavilion, and the application is to refurbish the playground. Ready?
Good morning. My name is James Matuzis. I'm one of the directors of landscape architecture and capital projects for New York City Parks. And today we're here to discuss Lieutenant Michael Davidson Playground. Our goals are to create a neighborhood park, a separate seating area for adults as well as everybody. And we're going to restore the 2 structures that are on the site. We are here today because the neighborhood is within Sunnyside Gardens Historic District. As you can see, you see a bird's eye view of the Phipps Garden Apartments, and the community master plan always had it in mind to have this lot reserved, set aside for a play yard. You can see in 1931, before the second unit of Phipps apartments were built, you can see it up in a top left-hand corner there. It's an open site, and then in 1935, when the second unit of Phipps houses was constructed, you can see the what we call the garden shed actually starting to evolve, and you can start seeing the playground start to develop there. Here's a great shot, 1937. You can see the play yard is in full swing. If you look in the background, you see the steel horizontal structure there. That's a swing set that was there. And then to the right, you can see the garden shed. And of course, you can see the shade pavilion to the left. Okay, in 2019, New York City Parks acquired this property from Phipps Houses. And it was named after Michael R. Davidson. He was a firefighter who unfortunately passed away and killed in the line of duty. And he grew up in this neighborhood. He grew up in Phipps Houses, and he actually played in this yard. So it's very fitting that this park is named after him. Here's a local context of the neighborhood. You can see that there's a few other green spaces in the neighborhood. There's Sunnyside Gardens private park. There's Lawrence Virgilio Playground, and there's Doughboy Park. Outside of the 10-minute walk, you have Lulu Dada Tornsey Playground as well. But, you know, this park will be a much needed asset to Sunnyside Gardens. In December of 2020, we had a community input meeting online. I believe there was almost 150 to 175 people attending, and we had a lot of passionate voices. And this wordle here basically represents what we heard, because, you know, Parks Department is here to listen to the community. And what we heard was play. We wanted play. We wanted a playground. We also heard we want seating. We want a garden area with a lot of seating. We want to have a peaceful area. We also heard that we want to preserve the two historic structures. So at the Parks Department, we're here to listen to the community, and we think we did a great job because when we went to the community board, we received approval to do so and to move along with this playground. So now we're moving to the existing site photos. You can see the 4-foot perimeter fence, which is a chain link fence. You can also see the interior fence, which is an 8-foot chain link fence. The sidewalks are in fair condition. The pavilion here is quite low, and you can see the 8-foot interior chain link fence. Now you can see a nice panoramic of the rest of the site. You can see the garden shed, you can see the pavilion. You can see some remnants of the old playground. You can see the safety surface matting that was left over. When Parks acquired the site in 2019, we did a lot of pruning. We actually removed a few slides, the old framework, the swing set. So, you know, we had to make it safe because we knew it wouldn't be a safe place for another two to 3 years when we actually build the site. Again, here's another view looking east on the site. You can see the historic Marjorie Cartley Grove there. I believe there are a lot of pin oaks along that grove there. Those trees will be preserved. They have already been pruned, but we'll prune them again by the time construction starts. But take notice to the perimeter fence against the neighboring house there. It's an 8-foot chain link fence. It does have barbed wire at the top, which, you know, we don't do barbed wire at parks. It's too dangerous. But you can see, you know, the type of condition you have there. Keep on looking towards the back where those parks employees are standing. And you can see that there is an adjacent backyard that has a little bit of a drop off there as well. So I just wanted to make note of that. Okay, so now here's a plan view of the existing conditions. You can see that there's a 4-foot perimeter fence, chain link around the entire street side of the park. And you have an 8-foot chain link fence between the multi-story building and basically the backyards of those houses as well. So you can see how that arrangement is there. There is an entrance coming off of 39th Avenue. It's quite narrow. It's only 3 foot wide. Please take note of that. And the Cortlandt Grove, you know, that's a very important feature of this site. So there's a lot of trees. So that those trees and the protected root zones of those trees really affected how we dealt with the site. So we took great care in making sure that we wouldn't harm that existing asset. Okay, now you're starting to see some photographs of the fencing condition. And again, right near the deli, there's an 8-foot high chain link fence, and then it drops down to 4-foot perimeter, and that wraps all the way along the street frontage. But that 8-foot chain link fence pretty much goes on the perimeter of the private property versus the public property. Okay, I know we're here to speak a little bit about fencing. So the first slide up is the proposed fence diagram. And what we're proposing is first, that little 3-foot wide entrance coming into the park is now widened to 10 feet. So it's a much more welcoming entrance. We're changing the 4-foot chain link fence to a 4-foot steel picket fence. We feel that it's more welcoming, and it still serves as a barrier to help, you know, young children not run into the street. We kept the entrance exactly where it was. We explored changing the entrance to the corner, but we found that it would harm the existing trees too much. So we felt that the existing entrance actually works quite well, but widened was a big part of making the decision there. Along the private properties, we decided to put an 8-foot high chain link fence with 1-inch mesh. chain link mesh. And the reason for that is the 1-inch mesh prevents people from climbing. Okay, you know, the 1-inch mesh we actually use around our handball courts, and that's to keep the balls from leaving the site. But it also doubles as a good way to keep people from climbing. It has the attribute of being a good visual screen. So I know some of the backyards are unkept in the back, and we're gonna have a nice visual screen there. There's not gonna be any barbed wire at the top of the fence. It's just gonna be a pure 8-foot chain link fence along that perimeter. At the entrance, we will have a double gate, steel picket 4-foot. And I believe that's all we need to talk about for fencing here. Now you have the schematic plan. Schematic plan, of course, I talked about the welcoming entrance coming in off of 39th. You're greeted by a flagpole that commemorates Lieutenant Michael Davidson. You can see the separate seating area in the front of the site. You have seating underneath the pavilion. You have seating around a garden area, a new planted garden area. We're increasing the amount of permeable space here. There was a need to do that by adding more planting. Planting was one of the major things that we heard during the community input meeting. So we definitely added more planting, and of course more impermeable space develops because of that. You can see the play equipment behind the the pavilion shade structure, and also a restored garden shed actually is going to become a happy to report a all gender bathroom. So this is a great attribute to this park. A lot of times we don't have restroom facilities in our park, and this was a great thing to do for this shed. We think it's a great use. And here's a section cutting through the park, and you can see the historic Cortlandt Grove up front with the pin oaks. And then you can see the pavilion in the background, and that whole half of the park from like the flagpole all the way to the left of this slide is all seating area that's separate from the play. You can have a nice peaceful experience looking at the Cortlandt Grove, looking at the planting and the planting beds, and you can enjoy shade underneath the pavilion. We're using our historic palette of furniture for this park. 39 World's Fair benches and bistro tables, and everything's painted black. The shade pavilion, we needed to modify. For code reasons, the shade pavilion was actually too low. So we need to raise the shade pavilion. Bless you. We need to fix some of the rafters. We did that. We're going to replace the roof. It was asphalt shingles, and we're going to add lighting. We're also going to add new footings to make sure everything's safe. So we're going to raise the pavilion and restore it to its former glory, only this time a little bit higher so people like I could fit under it without hitting my head. Here's some images of the play equipment, and you can see a whimsical fireman theme, water play. Okay, and back to the fence diagram. And I can move on to the appendix, but I guess I can open it up to questions if anybody has any questions, commissioners, for me.
All right, do we have any questions at this time? I think we'll move to public testimony, and then we may have questions after that.
Okay.
All right. So as always, we're going to start with anyone who signed up in advance, and then we will get to others who are present who didn't sign up in advance. So I'm going to first call Eileen Schill.
Good morning. My name is Eileen Schill. I'm here representing Councilmember Jimmy Van Bramer, who represents this area. I'm going to read for the record a letter that the council member has sent to Landmarks regarding this project. I write in support of the New York City Parks Department's proposal for Lieutenant Michael Davidson Playground located at 5002 39th Avenue. I'm proud to have secured over $5 million in funding to purchase and renovate the property, which was private, fenced off, and unused for many years. The playground has been named after Lieutenant Davidson, a 15-year veteran of the fire department who died while on duty, fighting a fire in a Harlem building on March 23, 2018. Lieutenant Davidson grew up in the Phipps houses across the street from the playground. He attended school and grew up in the Sunnyside and Woodside communities. We're proud that the new park will forever hold the name of the fallen hero. The construction of Lieutenant Michael Davidson Playground will activate a long dormant corner of Sunnyside and Woodside. I'm fully supportive of Parks' design plan, including the play equipment areas for the children aged 2 to 12. I look forward to seeing future generations of Sunnyside and Woodside families enjoying this playground for years to come. Sincerely, Councilmember Van Bramer. Additionally, I'd like to add a couple more notes to that, in that our office has received a petition of over 4,000 people supporting this plan. The plan enjoys support of the neighborhood because it restores what was historically a playground and restores the historic elements while also increasing green space in the area. The council member urges the commissioners to honor the historic nature of this playground for children while also honoring the fallen hero firefighter and supporting this appropriate and beautiful plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Gerald Perrin.
My name is Gerald Perrin. In 1980, I was a founding member of the Phipps Garden Apartments Tenant Association that was formed in my living room, and I am currently a co-president of that group. I have lived in the Phipps complex my entire life, all 87 years. I and my sister used this plot of land in the late 1930s and early 1940s when Phipps ran an outdoor nursery there. My 2 children did the same in the 1970s. Those who want a playground here have been loud and have enlisted outside groups to swell their numbers, even though many of them had never even heard of this piece of land and will never be users of the space. Conversely, many who would love and use this space if it became a quiet green space do not get involved in the advocating for what they want. They may be too elderly or perhaps disabled or otherwise not in good health. Nevertheless, they should also be considered. The draft design of this very small 1/4 acre piece of land, less than 1/4 acre actually, is essentially a playground for active 2 to 12-year-olds when there are 2 public and 1 private playground within a 10-minute walk with a combined area 50 times the size of this one, 50 times as much space. Instead, it should be a peaceful and restful area away from the hubbub of active children. That is a quiet green park where everyone is welcome regardless of age, but with special attention to the needs of the elderly, the disabled, or otherwise infirm, and mothers or fathers with toddlers and babies. Such a space does not exist anywhere in our area and is sorely needed. This would be much more in character with our Sunnyside Gardens Historic District, which you know was designed with extensive green space rather than paved over areas. When former Parks Commissioner Mitchell Silva was asked in 2016 interview what the people wanted for their parks, he replied, quote, "First, they want the asphalt gone." Repeat, the asphalt gone. They want trees and green space. Second, they want multi-generational space, unquote.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up because the bell has already gone off. So if you could just summarize and wrap up now, that would be great. I'm sorry, your 3 minutes has passed, so I'm going to ask you to just summarize and wrap up.
Thank you. What could be more in keeping with our Sunnyside Gardens Historic District? Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Doherty?
Sorry?
No? Not here. Martha Strauss? Okay. Eileen Connolly Goodwin, excuse me.
Good morning. I'm Eileen Connolly Goodwin. I'm the president of the Friends of Michael R. Davidson Playground. We work with the Queens Parks Department Partnership for Parks. We're a group of dozens of neighbors, neighborhood volunteers of Sunnyside residents determined to make our new playground a success. We want to thank Councilmember Jimmy Van Bremer for acquiring the lot, and we want to thank the Parks Department for hearing our voices in the playground design. We support the proposed plans, especially the fireman-themed features. Michael Davidson was my neighbor when I lived in the Phipps Garden Apartments. Michael and Eric played in the Phipps Outdoor Nursery with my children and all the children who resided in the Phipps. Naming the playground in Michael's honor was supported by over 4,000 neighbors and friends. As residents of Sunnyside Gardens, we are very aware of the landmark's restrictions. We're committed to preserving our landmark status. Those of us who care deeply about preservation are overjoyed that this sacred place will soon be returned to its historic purpose. To that end, we support restoring the Phipps Outdoor Nursery to a playground, welcoming all, especially children. Thank you.
Thank you. Herbert Reynolds?
Good morning, Chair Carroll and Commissioners. I'm Herbert Reynolds speaking for our Sunnyside Gardens Preservation Alliance. This first design from the Parks Department fails to recognize several character-defining features of Sunnyside Gardens. I'll mention only 3. Our historic plant community is revered for leaving open 70% of the available land to provide generous garden spaces. Yet Parks proposes the reverse, hardscaping only or nearly 100% of the space available in this lot after retaining only the original oak grove and thin buffer along the side street, which we identify with our landscape architect, Marjorie Sewell Cotton. Similarly, the 2 original park structures, the open pavilion and the White House, this being called a shed, that we identify with architect Clarence Stein, should indeed be restored. But whether to do so as Parks proposes is a question we leave to our best preservationists. Heartbreakingly, the crowded and inharmonious hodgepodge that Parks imposes around these historic features would compromise them all. And is there a need for a comfort station, especially one with the liability of a wet floor when it's adjacent to 4 water spray features? The green spaces throughout Sunnyside Gardens anticipated the crucial environmental needs of today, absorbing rainwater and capturing runoff with abundant plantings to reduce carbon and generate oxygen, cooling the environment. In stark contrast, the excessive hardscape in this design violates Mayor de Blasio's directive for green infrastructure to mitigate climate change, and it flouts Parks Commissioner Silver's much stated initiative to move from gray to green in city parks. Are we to understand that Parks plans to remove 11 trees without at least replacing their cubic footage? More than antithetical to the character of Sunnyside Gardens, this design is an affront to ecological good sense. What kind of future does it look forward to? What model does it set for the education of our children? Sunnyside Gardens was developed in order to house a diversity of residents who had never enjoyed a tranquil garden setting. To consider the values of diversity and social equity, this design is at its worst. There are already 5 acres of public playgrounds close to this site, another 3 acres at the 3 closest public schools, and almost 3 acres in Sunnyside Park. That's 8 to 11 acres. What our community needs most on this 1/4 acre is a quiet garden park that welcomes every segment of the community and not a redundant playground. This design from Parks closes the door to most visitors except active young children who would dominate this space to the exclusion both of toddlers and adults, especially our large apartment dwelling population, brimming with the elderly and those with disabilities who feel profoundly uncomfortable and unserved in all of our active playgrounds. A Sunnyside Gardens appropriate garden park will welcome all and discriminate against no one and serve the health and happiness of the widest population and our planets. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret Perrin? Okay. Selvin Gutar? Leonora Rexas? Ms. Elizabeth Reynolds?
Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Reynolds, a 36-year resident of the Historic District, and I'm speaking for myself and for my neighbors whose disabilities and age have disabled them to come to this meeting. They have sent in testimonies, dozens of them. They learned Zoom, but now we still have the same problem with mobility. I object to the Parks Department's submitted design and request that the LPC disapprove it in the hopes of tabling it for a more commodious design that's consistent with the character-defining features of Sunnyside Gardens. Clarence Stein's garden community is heralded around the world for its single most significant feature of building on less than 30% of available land and to provide ample open green space. Park's proposal for hardscaping most of this space is an anathema to Stein's work and to Marjorie Cotley's, his landscape architect. As the LCP designation report points out, quote, she believed strongly in the importance of landscape to create a healthier environment, and was devoted to creating sustainable landscapes. And then the report quotes Cotley herself, who wrote, the land should not only afford an appropriate setting for the buildings, but also provide a ready means of escape from the noise, dust, and confusion of the city and offer an opportunity to relax out of doors. We need to recognize her wisdom. This park site at street level should be a sustainable and a sustainable landscape with more interior planted beds, walkways, and its 2 restored iconic park structures. And then it can also be satisfy her ready escape from noise and confusion. But the park's design is paved over, cluttered, and calculated for noise and activity, which will, on the design, actually abut a 2-family house and yard at its southern border. And what has become of Mayor de Blasio's park and park commissioner's agenda for green infrastructure to mitigate against climate change? What does the design say about what we want for our children's future? Here is an opportunity to make a positive change for a more healthful environment in the future. A passive green park will be an enticing site in which to teach children the importance of the natural environment. It could be a lovely oasis for all visitors who need respite from their hectic lives, where all ages can appreciate Stein and Cotley's principles of planning. It's really a necessity to have a safe haven for our underserved neighbors with disabilities, and seniors who feel physically unsafe around children engaged in active play. In summary, with all these 8 acres or more of playgrounds in a very short walk of this site, the site gives parks the opportunity to respect the character defining features of its landscape designation, of its landmark designation, as well as to help reverse our climate disaster while providing a safe environment that will welcome everyone in Sunnyside and Woodside. For heaven's sakes, what could be a more respectful memorial to a fallen fighter than an environmentally responsible park that can help prevent fires that will come with global warming? Thank you.
Thank you. Alexander Cornelius. Gary Weber. Mariah Hindenburg. Alexander Hindenburg. All right, Simeon Bankoff.
District's Council. HDC is pleased to see the Parks Department is moving forward with long sought improvements to the small plot of land. We're particularly excited to see the restorations, the retaintions and restorations of the 2 existing historic structures, which seem like an unattainable goal when renovations of the site were last publicly contemplated. These restorations, or actually reconstructions, more to say, are a sound and solid basis for a vision for the site's future use. Unfortunately, the rest of the plan does not lay upon that foundation. The proposed playground is too big, too colorful, and too cluttered. The checkerboard living patterns are too busy, the jumping water features are too close to the restroom, and the overall design is cacophonous and, on the whole, trying to stuff 10 pounds of sand into a 5-pound bag. Historically, this was a reasonably passive space, capable of being used for flexible purposes such as eating and children's free play. The probable design of the space, Marjorie Sewell Caldley, had a fine eye for such things and wisdom, as was quoted in the designation report. And this simple design is in line with the nearby play spaces in the Phipps houses, which were designed by her. Bringing this design more into the present, passive use would also seem to align with the community's wishes, as evidenced by the word cloud of community comments presented on page 8 of the presentation and referenced by the presenter. A massive jungle gym is not among the items strongly supported. This is a small open public space in community known for its open spaces. Please let it take a cue from the shared greens of Sunnyside Gardens and let it breathe and just be.
Thank you. Christabel Goff.
Christabel Goff for the Society for the Architecture of the City. The decision to create a park can only be taken with reference to the surroundings, the character, the needs of a growing section of the city. In Sunnyside in 1930, the new development was unusual in that it reflected nonprofit ideals and a unified design scheme evolving in the hands of a group of planners who imagined creating an ideal village for the 20th century. The design, as presented here, is largely alien to its context, especially in its lack of unobstructed open space, in a plan jam-packed with irrelevant, out-of-scale, intrusive commercial furnishings. Historically, the Commission has been less than draconian in regulating the gardens of this self-described garden city. However, the current project, if not modified, would seriously detract from the overall context, given its prominent open location, and we note that the required report is binding. If they feel they should, children will climb on these brightly colored plastic-coated objects, whose primary function is economic, to be bought and sold by adults. Packing a small park with these expensive but ill-designed items of equipment speaks not of recreation,
but of regimentation, discouraging real play. Given the choice, most children would really rather be running around yelling and screaming and making mud pies in the gutter. And why not? We do call these spaces playgrounds. If we regard this park as part of the historic district, which it is, the proposed products are not period appropriate in a district that was designed over an unusually short space of time with an unusually cohesive architectural design. The distinguished landscape architect who is responsible for the definitive open spaces in the complex, Marjorie Cortlandt, like her colleagues, was looking to create a utopian environment. This is not business as usual, and the park should be refurbished with a view to reflecting the unique character of Sunnyside.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? So I'm just going to also note for the record, as it's been stated, we did receive some letters. So prior to, and we also received letters from many of the speakers today that were heard from. In addition, prior to the submission deadline yesterday, we received 14 other emails from individuals and 3 emails from organizations, including the Phipps Garden Apartment Tenants Association, Queens Preservation Council, and Sunnyside Gardens Preservation Alliance in opposition. And many of those letters supported the restoration of the original buildings and features such as the pavilion and lighthouse, but most stated their preference for maintaining the park as open green space. And all of these letters were shared with the commissioners prior to today's hearing. In addition, after the deadline, we have received 7 additional letters from individuals in opposition, which we'll also note for the record. So I'd like to ask you if you'd like to respond to the testimony. I think much of what we've heard has been about programming, which is not what we regulate, but to the extent that the features that have been discussed in the testimony affect the sense of the original design. If you can address that would be helpful.
Very good. Well, I'd like to say, number one, that Mitchell J. Silver, before he resigned, he approved this park with all his existing policies in play here. Marjorie Cotley designed this park with 25% of the space as green space. We're redesigning this play yard with 34% green space. So we're definitely increasing the amount of impermeable area. From a sustainability point, all the stormwater will be drained to a drain, and most likely the water, we're still testing the soils, but most likely all the water will go back into the soil before it reaches the city sewer system. All the pavements and all the safety surface are all very light colored, so it decreases the albedo effect. So from a sustainability point, my biggest thing is preserving trees. The Cotley Grove has very significant pin oaks. We're doing everything in our ability to preserve those trees and to help them stay mature trees for the future. I heard things from the testimony about us being discriminating against individuals. And I have to say, we're designing here a multi-generational park. This park is for all ages, not just for young children and their families. Like, you know, the gentleman here said he spent 87 years in Phipps houses. I'm sure you had many good times with your children at the park. This playground will essentially give future generations that same ability. I'm very passionate about giving young children access to green space. I believe it's very important for them to, even at a very young age, 2 years old, 3 years old, to experience nature, and what a great place to do that than in a playground. I myself grew up in New York City, and that was my first experience with nature. And I believe that that had a very big impact on my life. Just seeing the planting in the playground would, satisfy that specific need. So the importance for children is very, very important. I studied Clarence Stein and Henry Wright in planning school, and I respect them very much. And I believe that their layout of the neighborhood with the interior spaces being common open space was a great design, taken from Ebenezer Howard. Unfortunately, a lot of those common green spaces were chopped up, but here we have a public green space for everyone. So this is what I think the city deserves and what they need. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we have questions. Commissioner Goldblum?
All right. Forgive me if I missed it, but is there a plan?
Michael, can you just speak closer
Sorry.
to the mic? Thank you.
Is there a plan in your presentation that shows the historic or original design of the park?
We didn't have a plan of the historic play yard. We do in the appendix have further photographs showing some of the.
Right. You're going backwards.
I'm going backwards.
Yeah.
Here we go.
When you get to that shot of the kids with the old picture, stop.
There you go.
Stop. Perfect.
So
Go ahead.
yeah, so we didn't have plans. All we had was the existing conditions, and we did some research and we found a lot of great photographs.
Great.
So
based on, I mean, we're in the business of preserving the historic design.
right.
So it's important for me to try to understand what that was and whether it was intentional or whether it was just an accident. What's the ground surface?
It looks like the ground surface here in this photograph is probably compacted soil. It probably was lawn at one time. Underneath the pavilion is concrete. Okay.
So there were areas of grass and there were areas of concrete.
Right.
And where's that hedge?
There's a U hedge, it looks like, from the black and white photograph, and it's buffering the garden shed there. The site before we took it over had swings.
Right.
It had some climbing apparatus. There was a lot of safety surfacing left over, so you can see there is quite a bit of paved space. And like I said before, Marjorie Cotley designed the space with 25% of the entire lot being green, where we're redesigning it with 34% of the entire space being green. So in that terms, we're increasing the permeability as well as providing the program that would be needed in the modern day world here.
But you don't have a plan of what Ms. Cotley designed?
No, we only have the existing footprint from the existing conditions of today.
Right.
Which tells us.
So your presumption is that the existing conditions of today is the original design, and that based on that, it's the 25 versus 39.
Yes.
Thanks.
And I think though you had a black and white aerial photograph. Did you?
Yes, yes. All the photographs that we have show it evolving, evolution of the park itself. So the first photograph that we showed, I believe there were cars. It was completely paved. And then the second photograph showed all concrete, but with the shed. So as time evolved, I think, playground equipment was probably added, things were paved. So,
but I think
there's no, we don't have a plan of Cotley's original design.
right, but we do know that the grove along 39th Avenue is part of the original Cotley design. And I think it's our understanding that all of the structures are from the original design.
That is correct.
Okay, yes, Commissioner Chapin.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a couple of questions. One is, do you see any opportunity to increase the green space? And I know you have already. And also, you spoke about the trees, that you were preserving the trees, particularly that LA. And is there any place that trees can be added potentially that you might be able to
Right, if I can go to the plan again. Okay, you can see that there's a seating area with a lot of conversational seating there, and there will be 3 smaller flowering trees in that planted area. So it'll provide shade as well as, attracting bird life and that sort of thing there.
I guess I can see them lightly there.
Yeah,
They're
but
very light,
there's
yeah.
3, I can point to it.
So you are adding them,
Right,
okay.
so
Yeah, I
there's
got it.
3 trees right
Yeah,
there.
that's it.
And that is going to be a nice little seating area. You have conversational seating. That was one of the caveats on the approval with the community board, was that they asked us to create more conversational seating. So we have more benches facing each other.
Yeah, and Diana, thank you for raising that, because it did remind me that I actually didn't note the community board's resolution. So I want to do that now. Community Board 2, Queens Community Board 2 recommends approval of this item with 3 stipulations. One, that the perimeter fence be raised to 6 feet instead of 4 feet, that the play equipment include adaptive accessible equipment, and that the passive benches face each other.
Right. So I can address all those 3 caveats. The first being the raising of the fence. So of course, that is one of Mitchell J. Silver's policies about lowering the fences around all of our parks to make them welcoming. We gave this caveat to Mitchell J. Silver. He looked at it and he did not find any compelling reason to raise the fence in this location. And so he asked us to please keep it at 4 foot. So that's what we're honoring his request there. For the all-inclusive playground equipment, we have a lot of ground play elements for anybody who's in a wheelchair to experience. So it's beyond the requirement. And the third caveat was conversational seating. So I addressed that already.
Great, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, my second question was basically about an issue that was raised in, a lot of public testimony, some just written that we didn't hear today, but that we had about the balance with other playgrounds that are in some proximity to the planned one, and whether there is a need for the amount of play equipment. I have actually a 3- and 7-year-old grandchild, so I'm sensitive to the need for play opportunities, particularly water features, which I think in parks can be very, very helpful in the summer. But if you just address
Commissioner Chapin?
the general issue.
Sure. Commissioner Chapin, can you just also speak into the microphone? Thank you.
Within a 5-minute walk, the only open space that is considered to be a park is a private park in Sunnyside Gardens. Of course, all members of the community can belong to it, but it is a private park. So visitors outside of the neighborhood, can't go in there. And then you have Tornsey Playground, which is a very, very congested playground in Woodside, on the border of Woodside and Sunnyside. And that's within more of a 10-minute walk. And then you have Tornsey Lulu Dada Playground, which is also a very congested playground. So we feel that, from a playground point of view, that there is a much needed area here that, a small park would be a very good asset to Sunnyside Gardens.
And I think you also said that you heard that from other members of the community.
That is right. That is correct.
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
Two questions. One has to do with the idea of historic paving, right? And decorative paving. And how does the Parks Department distinguishes between those two? That's question one. And the second one, it has to do with the play equipment. You have these elements on it, and I think it's on page 20, which I didn't quite understand if they were symbolic or what do they mean? All that's,
So to address the question in regards to the pavement, We're using concrete pavers, which have a light color, so it would help, reflect sun instead of absorbing the sun. So that's one of the reasons why we're using the concrete pavers. They're decorative because they have a multi-pattern to it. The playground equipment here, of course, is in tribute to Lieutenant Michael J. Davidson. It's to inspire future children to become firefighters. There's a hydrant, there's a Dalmatian, there's a panel to the left where a kid could basically take the fire engine and trace it from, the firehouse all the way to the fire. So these are elements within the lower half of the play equipment where somebody sitting in a wheelchair could actually experience that as well. So
this is applied to manufacturing equipment already made, and apply this to it. Right? Is that-
a lot of this is stock, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, other questions? All right, is there any final comment you'd like to make before we close the hearing and begin our discussion?
I'm good. Thank you for having me today.
All right, thank you. All right, Commissioner Holford Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing? So moved. Thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baron, can you second that motion? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. As has been presented, this is an application to redesign this play yard that historically was a play yard for children. Please stay, we'll have our discussion, yeah. And then actually right around the time of designation was sold to a private developer and in recent years was acquired with the help and support of Councilmember Van Bramer to acquire it and have it turned into a park for the community. And I know that you've done a lot of community discussions, and that is what informed your decisions to incorporate some passive and some active recreation space. I want to just note for the commissioners that we are looking at what it was historically as we think about our reasons for our findings on appropriateness. Historically, the commission has not regulated the design of playground equipment itself, just the presence of it. So I just wanted to remind you of that as well. Again, this is a park. They are retaining the features that we know to be original, the original grove, the original structures, and then incorporating some more green space and equipment and chair furniture within that space, and the perimeter fence as well. So we'll begin that discussion. Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start this one?
Thank you, Sarah. It's this small public space presents real challenges, and it's rather typical of places which are perhaps underserved with green space and playgrounds, simply because there's a natural tension. In surveys, the most common thing that users are asking for, the greatest number, is generally just a place to relax in a nice open green space. At the same time, there will always be a number of groups that are looking for active uses, and for good reason, that they're needed, obviously. I think that I can relate to both of these needs very strongly as someone who was actually Deputy Commissioner for Capital Projects at Parks, because uses do change, and we need to respond to those in the city. And I think the question here is whether the appropriate balance has been achieved. The top requests of the community were for play, green, passive, seating, and multi-use, which really just reflects completely that division of needs here. So it sounds, I think that the preservation of the trees is being done, and they are going to add some trees, which is good. They have added some green space from what the current or most the largest use that they saw, which may or may not be really what the intention is, because we're not in a position to determine that. And it would be nice to see if they could perhaps add a little green space. But I think that in general, having play equipment here seems to be totally appropriate because the only really, there has been a playground in effect of some sort here. And I don't think play equipment is inappropriate to the site. Just the question is it possible to, given the character of Sunnyside Gardens, have it somewhat more green? Is that feasible here? It's a tough issue from a design point of view because this is really a very tiny playground, and I'm sensitive to the difficulty of getting and keeping elected official funding, which they have a substantial amount here for, and they need to proceed soon on this project, obviously. So I think I'm supportive of the general direction of trying to include, obviously, include active play areas, but also to see if there might be a little bit of a possibility to increase the green space. And I'm not talking about 60% or something, but just seeing if we could bring it a little bit higher. And I think that's it. As far as the structures, I think we want to make sure that what's being done to the structures, which are historic structures, is appropriate. And I'd like to hear from some of the architects on that score. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Thank you. This is an odd presentation in that, and usually Parks gives us these really granular, super careful and methodical presentations that are targeted to the mandate of this commission. And this one seems to have veered solidly out of that zone into areas of program and environment that don't seem to be particularly relevant to us. I mean, the absence of a historic plan, the absence of a focus on the historic condition seems to, for me anyway, makes it very hard for me to evaluate the current proposal. Was it all paved? Well, a lot of old playgrounds in the 40s and 30s were concrete or asphalt, 100% edge to edge. Maybe that was the condition here. Maybe not. I don't know. And I think that I have to put aside all the conversations about program and old versus young and all that stuff, and the rainwater, and think about what was the historic intention of the original architect who made this building, or they made this playground in a landmark district. I don't have enough basis to make that judgment. That said, in the absence of documentation, let's assume there is no such documentation. We got to look at the pictures. The pictures seem to show a hedge in front of the building and grass in front of the hedge. So I would say that the historic intent should somehow at least recognize what may have been an intention to create two zones in the park, right? One to the north of the pavilion, or to the little shed that was probably more, I don't know, maybe it was more green, maybe it was more formal. Obviously, they didn't want you to look at the shed. The shed wasn't this little tempietto that you were supposed to focus on. It was something that they were hiding behind a very high hedge. Maybe what was happening behind it was of a different nature. Maybe that's where the swing set was. I don't know. I mean, I'm not the architect. I'm just trying to look at what's being presented. But I think any analysis of the appropriateness of this from a historical perspective has to start from the history. That said, I don't think this is an inappropriate or based on the evidence presented, they're preserving the two structures. One of them they're raising significantly, so it's really not the same experience, but you know, clearly you can't have somebody whack their head on the eave as they're coming into the structure, so it seems like a reasonable accommodation. And the other one, they're keeping it and they're turning it into a bathroom, and that's a nice amenity. You know, and it's certainly appropriate. The location is appropriate, materials are appropriate. I think from a historic preservation perspective, the fence is appropriate. The you know, the paving material seems okay. It's not inappropriate. I mean, I think that this kind of knee-jerk response to make kids areas kind of aggressively visually stimulating is something that I think, I don't know if that science bears that out as being a good thing, but I think that the use of a checkerboard pattern for in a graphic way as a major architectural surface may not be historically warranted. We've done it, we've approved it in the past, so I can't say that it's inappropriate per se, but I think, you know, if you're trying to drill in and look at the historical elements, you know, and the preservation elements, the paving is one of the only ones we've got. So that might bear consideration. And just the architect in me says that if you want to make more green space, put it against the existing brick walls of buildings, for goodness sakes. You've got these two rather undistinguished brick sidewalls, and, you know, just extend your green space against them so that you create a little bit of screening. But that's not a historical comment at all. That's just me doing, you know, thinking about it from my point of view.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the two commissioners, Diana, both Michael and Diana. I think both of them touch on two key elements to this presentation. One is balance, right? And the other one is the historic context. How do we judge this case? And so it's just that to Michael's point, there's a lack of background context. This is very historic in the sense that Sunnyside Gardens and Clarence, and we all study in architecture school, and all the significance of this district. So I will only address the issue of in the historic context in terms of what Commissioner Silver did before he went on to his next position. But historically, if you look at parks, the fences are low or next to none. I mean, if you look at just the park around the corner, the famous 5 Points, the Columbus Park, there was zero fencing. And it was much more inviting. So I think from that standpoint of view, I think, you know, I agree that Commissioner Silver is correct in the sense that historically he's been going around the city in Lower East Side and the Sewell Park. All the parks have lower fencing, not that you don't want security, but a lot of times you don't feel like it's enclosed in. So at least for that element, I think that we're in concurrence with Commissioner Silver.
Okay, Commissioner Bland.
It seems increasingly like this contest in our city plays out in parks as much as it does anywhere else. And it's in a way sort of sad to think that that's true. But on the other hand, it was Olmsted that said Central Park was the greatest feat of democracy yet in America. So I suppose it's probably a good thing that we have these various opinions about our parks. I still find it, well, I guess this issue is continuous, active versus passive, children versus elderly. That last one I find to be upsetting and troubling. My own entry into public life in New York occurred because I joined the Pierpont Street Playground, which a committee, and quickly became chairman of it somehow or other, in 1978, I think. And it is and was a park, a playground, sorry, that combines both It certainly is an active play area, but it also has lots of older people who come and watch the children play. That's not a bad thing. It seems to me to be kind of a good thing for elderly people to do. At least in Brooklyn Heights, they seem to enjoy it. So anyway, I get that off my chest. So now we're down to what do we regulate? And what we regulate is not all of those uses, not that public warfare that seems to be going on in our parks, but yet a much more narrow focus. And therefore, I think what's being proposed is generally in an approvable, appropriate sort of realm. I don't want to get into the weeds on all the various parts of it. We have a design, and I think I will say, as others have said, I would like to see a little more green. And I don't know how that can be done, but that's not our job. But going from whatever the number was to 34% or whatever those numbers were, I think it can be increased. And I think without changing radically the design, it can be increased and should be increased. And I just hope that parks and the community can see places like this, even as small as they are, as a place for all people. I know those words have been said by the applicant here, but to really do that, I think perhaps a little more green is necessary.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
Yeah, I agree with the comments of my fellow commissioners, but there's one new thing that was added here, was the memorial to the firemen. And that's a new historic, it's going to become a historic element in that place. It's going to be there for 100 years. And I think they missed an opportunity to make it something truly special. And that is elevating it from the ground plane a step or two and just making it dominant in that space. Because that's what's going to be there in the future, and not the playground's going to be gone, the paving will change, but that would be one of the three elements in that park. Oh, that's all.
No, just the one issue that is, that you missed the opportunity.
Yeah, the flagpole, just to make it a dominant element in the space, to become the third historic element in that park. So to make sure that the placement of it, the height of it, the power of it is there for them.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Shamir Baron.
Thanks. I agree with Commissioner Goldblum that there is a kind of a dearth absence of historic documentation for us to refer. But I do think we do have the photographs, and the photographs show two things. One, this hedge, this long hedge along the kind of the horizontal length here between the shed and the adjacent pavilion kind of structure. And exactly right there. Actually, I think it's the other way. No, I think it's the other way. No, I think it's like that. Yeah. It looks to me like it's like this from the photographs. Anyway, and it also shows whether we can't figure out if it's grass on the ground or just dirt. Likely it was dirt, we can imagine. But the point is that it shows that there are no other things besides sort of built things, besides the shed and the pavilion kind of roofed structure. And I think that that's what needs to be retained here. The absence of objects. And and I know that we typically, all of us think about these play structures as entirely temporary, removable, changeable, but I think they become, in this very small space, they become dominant built elements that are not necessarily impermanent. I mean, everything's impermanent if you really think about it. So my sense is that it needs to, that I would say that there should be no play structures. And I also think that the hedge should be reintroduced somehow. I don't know how.
And that there might be a consideration of using sort of grass block pavers, which have, an equal amount of grass growing between some kind of hard surface. Now, I know that's, there are issues around wheelchairs and other things on those kinds of surfaces, so I'm aware of that, and maybe there's something to do about that. But I think my strongest feeling is that no play structures is what would be most consistent with the historic condition.
Okay, Commissioner Halford-Smith?
Yeah, I agree with pretty much most of what everyone has said so far. I think for me, it's they need to find the right balance between the quiet and the play area. This little site was a play yard. It was always a play yard, so I think that that's appropriate. But I do think that the play equipment seems to dominate now. And I think the reintroduction of the hedge and little more green space would improve that. There is the photo on page 5 does show that swing structure. So that might be something that they can go back to look at and use that as reference.
Okay, all right. All right, I think, and I understand and appreciate the comments about the play equipment, because I think we're all kind of looking from the historic photographs. So I appreciate that, but I do think, for me anyway, I sort of have taken the position as the same position Commissioner Cortlandt has, that without, if there's no other documentation, that it seems like all of the historic characteristics or features are being retained. The grove buffer, the sort of sense of open space, and the structures that existed, albeit one is being raised, but being retained in its original form. So we'll ensure that the staff is working closely on how that happens. And I do think that, again, for paving, I think, green dirt paving may also be a code issue. And sort of, I think there are challenges when we look at playgrounds and how you deal with accessibility and adaptability. And since I am comfortable with a play yard here, since it historically it was a play area, I'm comfortable with paving that suits that. And again, we don't normally regulate playground equipment. So I think that the majority of us could support a proposal today with the caveat that the applicant continue to work with the staff to find ways to increase the green space. And that could be exploring introducing a hedge, and in other areas where it could be particularly maybe along the boundary between the private properties and that park. And maybe that the paving pattern color continue to be restudied with the staff to ensure that it's has the same sort of sense of quiet that the original design had, as best as we can tell from the photographs. So I think that, and maybe that the flagpole be restudied with the staff. And then I think we have 6 to support it with modifications. Commissioner Chapin, do you think you could do it with those 3 modifications? Okay, thanks.
In the matter of a binding report, Borough of Queens, LPC 21000 50-02 39th Avenue, aka Phipps Playground, Sunnyside Gardens Historic District. It's a binding report. I recommend issuing a positive report, finding that the work will not eliminate any significant historic or architectural features of the site or historic district, that the proposed 4-foot tall picket fencing will be in keeping with fencing found at some properties throughout the historic district in terms of material, finish, and simple design, and is typical for fencing surrounding parks and playgrounds. That the 4-foot tall fencing will relate well to fencing and other site features at the adjoining residential and commercial buildings in terms of placement and height, helping it remain a harmonious presence within the streetscape. That the placement and simple utilitarian design of the proposed 8 feet tall chain link fencing adjacent to the taller secondary lot line facades of neighboring buildings will allow it to be a discrete background element, within streetscape views, that the presence of the proposed furnishings will be consistent with the historic development and continued use of the site as a play yard, and that the placement, size, and design of the site furnishings, play equipment, paving, and safety surfacing will not call undue attention to the playground or detract from the significant historic architectural features of the neighboring buildings or streetscape, and that the applicant will work with the staff regarding exploring opportunities to extend the green space, including looking at the apparently historic hedge, and some screening areas for the adjacent multi-story buildings, and also look at the paving materials that are being used at the playground as to ensure they are as appropriate as possible for the historic context.
Right, and also explore the flagpole, okay, in consultation with the staff. All right, Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, thank you, John. Will you call the vote? Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
No.
Commissioner Everardo Jefferson.
Aye.
The motion passes with one negative vote.
Thank you. All right, and we'll move to the next item. Thank you. And thank you to the members of the community who came out today.
We're going to move to item number 2, LPC 21-06249, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Staten Island, Block 517, Lot 49, 291 St. Paul's Avenue in the St. Paul's Avenue, Stapleton Heights Historic District. This is a neo-colonial style freestanding house designed by Otto Leffler and built in 1917. And the application is to construct a rear deck. And the applicant may begin the presentation, and please state your name for the record.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kareem. And today I'll be talking about 291 St. Paul's Avenue from the St. Paul's Avenue-Stapleton Heights History District. On the right, we see the facade of 291 St. Paul's Avenue, and on the left is the rear yard where the work is going to be taking place. The proposed work is a 38-foot deck spanning into the rear yard. Here is a historic photo from the 1940s, just to show you the pre-existing conditions of the building. Here on the left is the existing conditions of the rear yard, and on the right is a small rendering of what the deck would be. We have the steel post that would be showing from the rear, and we have the concrete deck with the railing on top, and there's a little staircase going from the higher elevation to the grade on the right, and there will also be one on the left, which isn't shown in this photo. Next, this is a Zola map showing the tax lot of the property. And on the left, there is a church/school with a parking lot in the rear yard that provides visual access to the back of 291 St. Paul's Avenue. Here we have a tax map on the top showing the point of views where all these photos were taken. If you look at number 3, view from Beach Street is the parking lot I was talking about in the previous slide. You can't really see it from outside, but if you were to go in, it provides direct visual access to 291. On number 2, view from Taxter Place is the complete opposite side. It's not the building isn't very visible from this angle, and you can't see the rear yard either. And number 1 is directly in front of St. Paul's Avenue, and it does provide minimal visibility to the rear yard from the right. Here are some additional photos of the rear yard and a little sketch to show you where all these photos were taken in the rear yard. And here I just wanted to talk about the existing porch at the site. Now the porch does have some historic attributes, so throughout the work it won't be touched at all, but the stairs itself have no historic attributes and they will be removed to accommodate for the proposed deck. Here we have an existing and proposed layout of the work proposed. On the left, we see that the stairs are dotted to be demoed, and the stairs on the top over there are the concrete steps going from the higher elevation to the bottom elevation beyond the retaining wall. These stairs are to remain and to be replaced in kind as concrete steps. And the porch is going to remain as is, as shown on the drawings. And on the right, we see the 38-foot by 22.5-foot proposed concrete deck. And we have the steps on either side, as we discussed before, going from the higher elevation to the lower elevation, because the proposed concrete deck will be the same elevation as the existing porch. Here are existing and proposed elevations from the rear yard. On the left, we just see the railing and the stairs for the existing porch, and on the right, we see the concrete deck, its proposed railing, the 3 steel beams, and the steps on either side. Now, the railing is on the exact same height because the proposed concrete deck will be the same elevation as the porch, so there's not going to be an additional height to create more visibility for the rear yard. But the concrete, the steel beams will be visible and the steps will also be visible on the left and right. Here are additional sections and elevations from the left and right of the deck. And here are additional details showing the framing plan, dimensions, material, what the deck's going to be made of, how to install them, and things like this. This is the color samples for each item proposed. We have the railings to be about a chrome silver for the deck and the stairs going down on either side. The concrete is just going to be concrete, which is going to be a nice gray, and the steel beams are just going to also be gray just to fit in with the whole design. Here we would like to talk about the other buildings in the area in the same block. There are 2 buildings that have beyond the 8 feet limit of the staff level. So they also have decks, not as large as ours, but it's the same principle. And 279 St. Paul's Avenue is actually shown from Taxter Place. I'm sorry. I had more, but it's not shown in these slides. We had rear view photos and we had a bird eye photo, but for some reason, there must have been a mix up with the slides. I'm sorry about that. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Cortlandt.
So can you go back to the section or the elevation, page 9, I guess it is?
The side or the back?
Let's do page 9, if that's okay with you.
Page 9, okay.
So the deck is at 71 and the grade is at 57. Is that right?
So the grade goes, so.
At the bottom of the deck, where the deck ends.
Yeah, so that is where the grade showing is where the deck ends.
Right. So at the end of the deck,
Yes.
it's going to be from 57 to 71 is 67. So it's 14, almost 15 feet high.
From the front, yes.
From the place where you can see it downhill.
Yes.
So when I'm looking at this, I'm going to see a 15-foot high steel structure, and I'm going to be looking up because I'm looking uphill, right?
Yes.
And I'm going to see the underside of the metal deck and the steel beams and all that stuff, and then a chrome railing above it.
Yes.
Is there any other deck or any other structure of this extent and that height along the entire row?
So the only reason it is so high is because I didn't mention before, you see the grade.
Right. No, I got that. I understand why it's high. I'm just asking if there are any other.
There isn't anything because there's nothing that spans that to this length.
Right.
But the other properties do have garages and so 2 of them have decks that,
Right.
so we're
Stick
not
out.
creating like, we're not destroying the green area. We're just adding as much use to the rear yard as possible because this sloped area is not going to be used to its full extent and it's not as safe for kids and stuff like this. So adding this deck would create more use for the rear yard and it's not hurting the environment or the community in any way.
All wonderful things, but I'm not asking that question. Are any of the garages, where does this deck extend relative to the garages? And are those garages about that same height or is this higher than the garages?
So let me see if I could have a photo.
Right, like you see that row of garages there.
Yes.
Is your deck going to be higher than those
No, the
garages?
deck won't be higher than the garages.
And does it stick out further than those garages?
No, it actually either to the line, to the front of the garages or behind it. Because our rear yard requires 30 feet from our property line to the deck. So we have 30 feet at least, and these decks are also on that 30 feet mark or in front.
Right.
So our deck is gonna be behind and lower. It's gonna be the same elevation of the porch, so it's not gonna go higher. You see that garage on the left? How it's higher than the porch?
Well, that little shed, you mean, that's behind where
Yeah.
the people are staying? I'm not talking about that shed.
Well,
I'm
I
talking about
know.
the garages that are
Yeah.
down at the driveway
I
level.
don't have any picture in the additional photos that weren't
Right,
included.
like there.
Yeah.
Are those garages 15 feet high, you think?
15, so
Like your deck is gonna be? Or, you know,
they will be high, all right.
looks like they're a little bit lower.
Be about
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And so in this photograph, is your building the one, can you just, is it where the arrow is? And
So no, these are the additional buildings that also created decks.
Okay.
Our building is somewhere back here. It's not visible from Taxter Place.
Okay, so it's not visible from the public way
On this side.
on this side, and from this view from Thaxter Place, it will be concealed behind the garages that are as tall and as deep as the deck.
Yes.
Okay, and then can you just go back to the view where it is visible?
So these are, so this is from St. Paul's Avenue. You will be able to see, I guess, the railing from over here.
I see, just a bit of the railing.
Over here, it's not visible, it would be back here somewhere. And over here, you would, it's hard to say if you would be able to see it from over here, but if you were to go into the parking garage, you would have a full view to right.
Okay, all right, and so limited visibility from the outside and from within, fitting within the context of the garages.
Yes.
Okay. All right, other questions? Okay, let's see, we'll go to public testimony.
Thank you.
Next. All right, we have Christabel Goff.
Christabel Goff. On this occasion, I have the pleasure of reading for the Victorian Society in New York, who are not able to be here today. And since I am not on their committee, may I say, I think it's one of the most expert committees that we have in the preservation field. So, founded in New York City in 1966, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th century and early 20th century heritage. The NY chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual landmarks, interiors, and civic art. The Victorian Society urges denial of this application for a grossly overscaled concrete deck at the rear of this house. The form and scale of the proposed structure cause it to be out of character with the rear yards on this block. The rear yard garages are typical of many of these houses, and the modest deck shown as a precedent are the types of alterations that might be appropriate, as they would be supportive of the district's historic and architectural character. Thank you. And I believe they submitted this already. So
yes, thank you. Simeon Blankov.
Simeon Blankov, Historic Districts Council. Reviewing this proposal, HTC finds it inappropriate on a variety of levels. The length of the deck, combined with the topography of the backyard, the proposed concrete deck makes this proposed design a massive structural intervention on the property and remarkably intrusive, even amongst this row of historically altered rear facades. In addition to the ungainly size and shape of the proposed deck, the proposed material palette of exposed steel columns, chrome railing, and gray concrete are more fitting for a retail parking structure than an appendage to an early 20th century neocolonial house. And as Commissioner Gordon mentioned, it would be very visible from the public way if people were looking up at its understructure. It's not our place to redesign this proposal, but we recommend that its neighbors are more closely examined for possibly appropriate design cues, and the architectural language of the historic district is strongly considered as well. A rear deck could be appropriate here, but not this one.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Okay. All right, so would you like to respond to the testimony?
So we thought about reducing the size of it, but the rear deck isn't to make a statement or anything, it's to make use of the rear yard. So now there's a retaining wall there that's holding up half the grade and the other half the grade. So half the rear yard is not in use and it's not as safe for the kids. There is a family that lives there and it's not a safe area. So allowing this rear yard gives the kids a safe place because we're putting a railing around also for them to do whatever they like, for the families to sit outside and have the entire use of their rear yard instead of, oh, I have a 60-foot rear yard and I'm only allowed to use 20 of it because the rest of it isn't safe for my family. So that's why we decided to go with the full length of the deck instead of reducing it to 10 or 20 feet.
Okay, thank you. And I just also did want to note for the record that the community board did review the application and recommends approval of the application.
Yes.
So can you, I think you maybe already did this, but can you just again clarify how much beyond that, there's sort of a two-tiered backyard, how much beyond the retaining wall does it go?
Yeah. So in the drawings, I'm showing the retaining wall, about another 15 feet beyond.
Okay. All right. And
the retaining wall is to remain as is and repaired as needed.
Another question, sir.
Yes.
If it comes, the deck came down at the retaining wall, how high above the retaining wall would the deck?
So if it came down anywhere, let me find a good picture. So anywhere from this point and beyond isn't gonna make, it's gonna be 15, 14 and a half feet. This is the place with the great slope, and from here on, it's almost the same slope. So when? Yes. So yeah, so if we have the, if we drop it down here, it's gonna be the same height for these steel beams. And if we were to do it a little before, it could disrupt the retaining wall. That's why we decided to go as in front and drop the foundation below the retaining wall.
Thank you for the clarification.
all right. Okay. So if there are no other questions, we'll close the hearing. Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And this is, you know, in this district, there are sloped properties and topography is steep in some places, and we've seen proposals for decks, in fact, for our individual landmark at the Audre Lorde House, for a deck to go out over the back, and we've seen examples that in this district of these multi-tiered decks. So I think the idea of a deck is something that is common in this historic district, and I think the question is, how does the particular size and configuration of this deck affect this historic district? So Commissioner Cortlandt, would you like to start?
Yes. All right, well, it's a backyard. It's nominally visible, all of which argue for moderation and reasonability. However, I just feel like this structure makes no recognition of any kind to the fact that it's attached to a historic district wood frame single family house. And I would make the following suggestions or recommendations. Number one, that the applicant work with staff to make sure that this monster structure is not visible or only minimally visible. I think that the documentation provided was inadequate to make that assessment correctly. I think a mock-up with photographs of the mock-up is what we normally require, and I think that there's no reason why that cannot be done here. Assuming that it is relatively not visible, then I would look at it the same way we look at rear yard additions that are not visible from the public way. And I would suggest that in that case, if this were an interior of a courtyard in a townhouse block or somewhere else, the extent of the structure would probably not be appropriate unless there was significant precedent in the block for such developments. Certainly, the usability of the rear yard can be maintained by having the deck terraced down, having steps, and unless there's an unusual situation and there's a handicapped person, it's a single-family house, you're allowed to, or if it's a multifamily, I don't know, but you're certainly allowed to have it step. So I would suggest they consider having it step, and under no circumstances should the deck be built in such a way that raw steel, metal decking, polished chrome railings be associated with a house that is wood and that whose charm and historic value derive from that wood design. Even if you're going to have to use steel and concrete for structural reasons, it should be clad in the way that will make it resemble those other rear yard accretions that we see on this block. Posts out of wood, lattice infill underneath. Hiring an engineer will get you something that won't fall down. I think you might need someone else to help you out, making it look like it belongs where it is.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
I tend to agree with what Michael just said.
Okay, Commissioner Bland?
I think Michael has pretty well covered the territory, and I would agree with almost everything. I just think the whole idea of a steel and concrete deck on the back of this house completely overwhelms the little house. We're used to having overwhelming issues sometimes with regard to rooftop additions or rear yard additions. This is a new definition of how something can overwhelm a small-ish single-family frame house. So a lot has to change.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I agree with the comments of my fellow commissioners.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shimmerman?
Yeah, I mean, I think if they had come to us with the proposal of a garage like the other garages, we would have considered it favorably because there's precedent. And I don't think that in the end, this is that much substantially kind of bigger or more obtrusive. So I do think that there's definitely, a room for them to do something as big as those garage buildings. So I think that that's an appropriate general approach. I just think that it should be revisited and modified a bit just so that it more resembles that relationship of garage to building. On the other hand, I'm just curious, and I'm not asking you to respond right now, but why they wouldn't have wanted to do kind of an elevated garden in that space so that you're actually bringing up some of the ground and then potentially fencing it a bit. And then it's, usable as a garden space. So I'm just throwing that out there. Thanks.
So, if I can.
It's okay. Our hearing is closed, but thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith?
I agree with the previous comments. I think that they need to work on the details. And I think bringing it back to the retaining wall might be more appropriate, but I think we don't have enough information to even judge how big it is in relationship to the other buildings around it and the garages.
All right, Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I, with other commissioners, found this, particular solution, I'll say remarkably ugly. It really doesn't seem appropriate to the structure, the materials and the color. this large concrete deck. Ideally, it would be wood if it could be, I don't know. And while it isn't visible much from a public way, I count to some extent it's an alley and its neighbors use it and visitors use it. And how is it that much unlike a donut where other people can see the back of your house? It just should be more compatible. Even if it was concrete, if it was maybe some kind of tinted concrete that was, I don't know, green or something. But all of the materials and the colors really just make it stand out, and I couldn't approve this as presented.
Okay, all right. And Commissioner Goldblum, I think when you were thinking of these very specific 3 suggestions, were you thinking of them being able to do that with the staff and not confirming it's not visible, terracing it down, and restudying the materials to relate to the house itself and the other structures in the back, including as much wood as possible and lattice and other features? And so I think, oh, Commissioner Jefferson. Okay, got it. Okay. So I think many would be supportive of that. I know Commissioner Hopper-Smith, you were talking about setting it back further, so I don't know if terracing it would address it for you, but if that's what you were actually thinking, we could make that motion.
Okay. Oops, hold it a second. One. Okay. Regarding 291 St. Paul's Avenue in St. Paul's Avenue, Stapleton Heights Historic District, the application is to construct a rear deck. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the St. Paul's Avenue, Stapleton Heights Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, however, finding that the work will not damage or eliminate the significant historic architectural features of the building, that the deck will be only minimally visible from the public thoroughfare, from limited vantage points along St. Paul's Avenue, Taxter Place, and Jackson Street, through driveways, side yards, and service alleys, that the new deck railings and stairs to the rear yard will be simple and utilitarian in design, with decks, a common feature is found on freestanding houses in this historic district, that the proposed deck, while large, will not extend to the rear yard line, nor or substantially eliminate the presence of a very deep rear yard, that other rear yard additions, decks, and garages already exist on the block. Therefore, the proposed deck will not diminish the central green space, and the work will not detract from the architectural character of the building or of the St. Paul's Avenue, Stapleton Heights Historic District. However, the applicant will work with staff to modify the design of the deck in the following ways. First, he will explore visibility by erecting a mock-up and verify with staff that it is not visible or minimally visible. Second, he will study the design of the deck to have it be made of materials and of designs that help it blend with its other neighbors and remain consistent with the design of the historic house to which it is attached, and also explore lowering or reducing the footprint of the deck to make it more harmonious with its neighbors.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion? Second. All right, John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland. Aye. Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford-Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson. Aye. The motion carries 9 in favor, none opposed.
Okay, so it's approved with modifications. You can work with the staff on resolving those. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to item number 3, LPC 21-10492, an application for an amendment. This is in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 153, Lot 7501, 49 to 51 Chambers Street, the former Emigrant Industrial Savings Bank individual and interior landmark, also in the African Burial Ground in the Commons Historic District. It's a Beaux-Arts style skyscraper and interior banking hall designed by Raymond F. Almerall and built in 1909 to 12. And the application is to amend a proposal approved at the public meeting of July 21st, 2020 for alterations to the banking hall to include the installation of partitions, desk, and cabinetry.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's nice to mostly see everybody, or at least most of your faces, in person. Ward Dennis with Higgins Quaysbarth and Partners here on behalf of Culture Spaces and Woods Baggett, the architect. This is some additional work at the banking hall of former Emigrant Savings Bank just across the street here at 49 Chambers Street. I think the Commissioners remember about a year ago, there was an approval to renovate this space and reuse it as a sort of immersive digital art display. Big factor of which was controlling the light within the space. We had a public hearing, I think in March, and then we had a public meeting just about a year ago, at which most of this work was approved. The original proposal in March included construction, the number 2 there, construction of new enclosures within the designated space, as well as blocking up all the windows on both the Chambers Street and the Reed Street side. Following that public hearing and feedback from the Commission, we revised the proposal. The Chambers Street windows are now fully open, and we have this curtain system which controls the light within the space. What we're here to talk about today is what's happening in that space beyond the curtain, which is a space which will be permanently illuminated by the Chambers Street windows. On the far left is the original proposal. You can see the green at the very bottom. Here was the construction within what I always refer to as the narthex of the banking hall space. And then in the revised proposal, we eliminated that construction and just relied on these 2 pieces, which are outside the designated space for the sort of light locks that we need to get people in and out. We had always anticipated that there would be activation and some amount of furniture happening out here. What we're here to show you today is that furniture plan, a mix. Some of it is furniture which meets staff rules. Some of it is connected in via electric connections and the like. Some of it is larger than a movable piece of furniture. None of it is attached to the building itself. None of it is attached to the floors or the walls. It's all sort of freestanding elements. We do have 3 pieces that will require floor electrical connections, so those will require penetrations through the floor. Oops, I went the wrong way. I think Commission has obviously seen a lot of different proposals over the years for reusing these interior landmark spaces. The Plaza Hotel Edwardian room here, I think, is the closest in terms of precedent to what we're proposing. Basically freestanding display cases for a gift shop on one side and a desk on the other side. Other similar projects, 195 Broadway and the Queensboro Bridge project, both of which involve a lot more built-in stuff than we're proposing, but also have a lot of furniture pieces that the Commission has reviewed and approved. This is 2 historic photos from time of construction, time of opening the building, circa 1911. The view on the left is looking sort of across the narthex from east to west, with the revolving doors on the left there, and you can see the light streaming in from Chambers Street, the south-facing windows. View on the right is that revolving door enclosure that sits at the center of the space. This will be the main entrance into the building for all patrons. And then if you turn around from that last view, you're looking into the banking hall here towards Reed Street, and that's where the display will happen. The curtains will basically come down exactly in front of where you're standing. Existing condition photos. This is a view looking to the west on the left, to the east on the right. The air conditioning equipment, which dates back to, I think, the banking hall days up here, is going to be removed as part of this project. So that will be cleaned up and restored. The check writing desk that you see here actually belongs in the center of the banking hall space, and that's where it will be placed when the project is opened. Couple things to note here. You will see along the south wall, there are numerous junction boxes covered over by plates. That's providing a lot of the electrical service that we need for these bookcases, locker enclosure, and other elements. And also note that there are 3 different marbles here. There's a green marble, a sort of pinkish marble, and then a cream colored marble, all of which is flat ashlar, until this decorative cornice molding piece up here, which is about 10 feet up. Everything that we're proposing is well below that 10-foot datum line. So the only thing we are covering is the flat masonry pieces themselves. And then this is just a close-in view. This area right here on the left in the west wall is where you previously approved a new door opening to go out to the west entrance on Chambers Street. There are also previously proposed some modifications to this teller screen and this teller screen. The floor in this area is a mix of tesserae tile and marble edging around. You can see that some of the tesserae has been cut into previously. There were different installations for bank railings and stuff like that. So this was a space that was used by the bank and used by subsequent tenants for different kinds of furniture. So I think what we're proposing is certainly consistent with that. I mentioned, and I'll show later, that we do have some floor penetrations. They will be through the tesserae, not through the flat marble. And this is just an example. We don't have any photos of the space in use historically, but the example on the left of a similar condition at 1 Hanson Place with railings, and you can picture, you know, in the old-fashioned banks where you would go see somebody and there would be somebody at a desk there and you would go through the railing and all that sort of nostalgic era of banking. So this is the plan for what we're proposing. As always, the main entrance for all the patrons will be through these revolving doors. Coming into the right here, we're now proposing a ticketing desk here on the right. This is an open air locker enclosure on the far right here. This is the piece that I think was most impacted by eliminating the construction here. We had thought that we could accommodate the lockers and coat check within the sort of light lock area, but we cannot. So that's why we are proposing this here. You will go in, you will go through the exhibit as you come out through the gift shop, of course. We have furniture here within the gift shop. We have some pieces here that sort of define the edge of the gift shop. And we do have here 1, 2, 3 anti-theft paddles. Those are the only pieces that require attachment, and that will be 2 junction boxes in the floor, new junction boxes in the floor. Looking at the gift shop side in some detail, we have these low pieces here. They're about 4 feet tall. We did that on purpose so that we can maintain the views from east to west. We have freestanding tables that are about 3 feet tall. The blue lines that you see here are the electrical connections to feed the different bookcases and other elements. These will all be wire molding on the flat masonry, probably right at that transition from the pink marble to the cream marble, painted out to match the cream marble, attached by adhesives, so fully reversible. And those will feed here. There is actually a junction box back here. It will feed here from behind, and it will feed from the existing receptacles here, which will power these bookcases and feed these. The 3 anti-theft devices are right here, again with a inset into the tesserae tile, a junction box, a sort of bronze junction box. Patrons can either exit through here to go back to the coat check, or can exit through here and go out through the 49 Chambers entry door at the west there. This is along this wall here by the teller counters. The proposed bookcases on this wall are 6 feet 11 inches, which is just below the height of this cornice of the teller counter. They actually will sit in front of these piers, not in front of the towers themselves. The 4-foot or so cabinets here with a 4-foot 9-inch anti-theft devices. All of the furniture will be walnut veneer with brushed brass details. Along this wall and along the south wall, we have the opening here, which is 7 feet 8 inches, and these will match the height of that opening at 7 feet 8. 2 bookcases here, and this is the table in the center of the space. And then same thing along the south wall here. We have about 2 feet 4 inches between the top of these units and the bottom of that cornice, that decorative guilloche cornice type detail. And then these are rendered views from within the space. You can see that all of the bookcases are sort of freestanding units. They don't read as built-in elements. They're very much designed and intended to look and be freestanding. Another view on the south wall. Again, this is about 2 feet 4 inches from here to here. And all the power for these will come from the outlets that sit immediately behind here. This locker enclosure, as I mentioned, it is open to the sky. So you can stand in there and look up and see the ceiling of the banking hall itself. It is 22 feet long by 8 feet 4 inches at its widest. You can see that we have set it off from this wall about 1 feet 6 inches, and from this wall about 5 inches. We did that intentionally so that you will see it and read it as something that's standing in the space rather than something that's built into this corner. We have discussed with staff, this covers over this pilaster a bit. So this certainly could be moved over a little bit to clear that pilaster. You would lose a little bit of that reading of the freestandingness on the side. The ticket desk is about just under 8 feet long by about 2 feet deep, 4.5 feet tall, I believe. Will be powered by a floor molding coming across here. That will be all the, just a regular sort of rubber floor molding adhered to the floor itself. This is a section through. The locker enclosure is 6 feet 11 inches, so a little bit shorter than the bookcases on the other south wall. And the 8 foot 4 inches here. And then this is a rendered view of it, sort of close in and then step back a little bit. It's about a 6 foot 6 inch opening to here. We do have signage. This is all static, applied signage lit from above, not internally illuminated, not LED screens. And that is the full extent of the proposal.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions, commissioners? Okay, let's go to public testimony. All right, Simeon Bancroft.
Hello, Commissioners. Simeon Bancroft, Historic District Council. HDC has no objections to the proposed amendment. Previously approved permit for the space, as long as all the proposed appliances as potentially movable and removable as they appear in the drawings. We'd also like to take this opportunity to again stress the importance of minimally impacting or penetrating the protected historic materials of the interior landmarks in all installations.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Okay, and I'll also note for the record that Manhattan Community Board recommends approval of these modifications in furniture installations, but recommends that the staff should work with the applicant to ensure that there can be time set aside and conditions made to provide barrier-free access to the interior landmark banking hall without having to pay a fee. So it seems to be about the entry fee.
Yeah, the community board was concerned that it be accessible to everybody in the community, not physically accessible, but
yeah,
economically accessible. Culture Spaces, which operates a number of programs in Europe, actually has a foundation in Europe that they're going to copy here that does provide lower cost entry fees, group entry fees, works with schools, works with lower income residents and the like. Not really a landmarks issue, but it was a concern to the community board, and we followed up with them on that.
Okay, great.
And just to respond to HDC, yes, as I said, everything here is actually not attached at all. It's just set on the floor. So fully removable, reversible. The adhesive wire moldings are fully reversible. There are 3 penetrations into the floor, which will be a sort of very standard 3.5 inch or so bronze outlet junction box set within the tesserae tile floor.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I was just going to ask John to comment on the issue of the accessibility of interior landmarks, which I know we've had a couple of times where we have it somewhat more privatized than, if you would.
I mean, has been an issue under litigation, the requirement that it be accessible to the public on a customary basis. And I think there's analogous to a theater where, we have many interior theaters, landmarks which are theaters, but to gain access, you do need to have a ticket to get in. And I think that's analogous to this in terms of getting public access.
Thank you.
Could I just add to that? Yes. The area that we're talking about here, that sort of front narthex area, because it's outside the ticketing, theoretically, or actually anybody from the public could walk in there, walk through that part of the space, and during the 15 minutes or so of every hour when the curtains are up, would at least be able to look into the rest of the banking hall. You would need a ticket to go into the banking, to go into the exhibit itself.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other final questions? Okay. Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Motion to close the hearing?
My mind is gone, I felt.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Commissioner Shamir Baron, would you second the motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we'll begin our discussion now. The hearing is closed. And so thank you for the clear presentation and the details about installation. Commissioner Bland, would you like to start this?
Sure. I think this is fine. It was fine before. We went through a whole series of issues and improved the design, as I recall, by opening up the narthex. And so I think this is fine as well. The issue of reversibility is just the paramount issue in all of these interior landmarks, which are being used in very different ways than they were originally intended. So I'm perfectly happy with it.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson?
Yes, the same. I think this has been carefully thought through. And as usual with this type of project, it's just the detailing and the careful. How do you put a conduit in the floor without damaging the floor? Stuff like that.
Okay.
Well thought through.
Thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baron?
I agree. I think that all of the furniture pieces are in fact reversible, and they should just, as it sounds like they will, be careful and work with staff to make sure that the penetration of those electrical points is clean and as minimal as possible.
Okay. Commissioner Hoffman-Smith?
I agree. I think the one thing that I would comment on that was suggested actually by the applicant is to relocate the locker section. Maybe they could center it between the corner and the pilaster, so it's not, it looks a little odd that it's sort of 18 inches off the back wall. So
Center.
otherwise,
Okay.
I think everything looks really good.
Commissioner Chapin?
Yes, I think this is improved with reduced areas of impact and the windows not being covered. And I agree with other commissioners about the need to have the staff work closely with them on any penetrations of historic fabric.
Okay. Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree it's appropriate, and I think Ann's idea is a good one.
Okay. And Commissioner Chen?
Likewise, yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Bland, would you make a motion and then just ask that they continue to work with the staff on centering the locker enclosure?
in the matter of 49 to 51 Chambers Street, the former Immigrant Industrial Savings Bank. This is a application, an individual and interior landmark in the African Burial Ground and the Commons Historic District. This is an application to amend a proposal approved by the public meeting of July 21st, 2020 for alterations to the banking hall to include the installation of partitions, desk, and cabinetry. I recommend approval, noting that the installations, including shelving, display tables, and courtroom and service desks, relate directly to the previously approved adaptive reuse of the banking hall and are reversible in nature, that the metal and wood materials of the proposed installations are neutral in color and of high quality and will harmonize with the materials in the space, that the design and scale of the installations are simple and modest and will not detract from the monumental character of the banking hall, that the installations will be set forward from the anteroom walls and that some of the fixtures are raised off the floor or having open sides or ceilings, allowing more visibility of the significant features and volume of the space, thereby giving a sense that the installations are not permanent. And that the work will be largely installed in front of simple stone walls and on areas of the mosaic stone flooring, which have previously been altered with the installation of power outlets and former fixtures. Therefore, the proposal will not disrupt pristine surfaces. I note also that the applicant will work closely with staff to limit and refine anchorage or penetration points related to the installations in order to reduce potential damage to historic fabric.
The Explorer Center in the locker enclosure.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Great, thank you. All right, Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
I say second.
Okay, John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Baron,
Aye.
and Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
The motion carries 9 in favor, none opposed.
Thank you very much.
So we'll just note for the record that Wellington Chen is recused on this item.
Okay, I'll go ahead and read in item number 4, LPC 21-08147, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 196, Lot 5, 408 to 410 Broadway, AKA 38 to 44 Cortlandt Alley in the Tribeca East Historic District. This is an Italianate style store and loft building designed by Henry Engelbert and built circa 1866 to 68. And the application is to modify openings, replace infill, and install signage.
Okay, sure.
Why don't you go ahead and get started? We have one recusal and Evelyn will be back shortly.
Sure. And just for the sake of the record, since there was a long pause, this is item 4 LPC 21-08147, and it's 408 Broadway.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Robert Bianco with PKSB Architects, representing the owners of 408 Broadway in the Tribeca East Historic District. Just want to say it's nice to be back in the hearing room today. 408 Broadway is a through-lot building which extends through to Cortlandt Alley and is located just south of Canal Street in the Tribeca East District. The scope of work that we are proposing today is limited to the Cortlandt Alley facade, where we are proposing the introduction of a new entry door at grade and some infill modifications at the cellar level. So the building's primary facade is located along Broadway, and primary entrances located on Broadway. Cortlandt Alley facade has a loading dock, freight elevator entrance, and a couple emergency egress doors. And unfortunately, we've not been able to locate any historic photographs of the Cortlandt Alley facade from prior to the installation of these roll-down gates, which can be seen in the designation photo on the top right. However, there was a previous C of A application about 12 to 15 years ago, which was largely restorative of the Cortlandt Alley facade. The roll-down gates were removed and some infill modifications at the first floor and cellar. So we've included that the existing elevation from that previous application, which shows the condition of the Cortlandt Alley facade prior to the most recent alterations. There were a variety of door heights and sizes along Cortlandt Alley at both the sidewalk level and at the loading dock level. This bay at the second to most southern bay, there were two doors, one at the sidewalk level, one at the loading dock level. Those were removed. The loading dock was extended through to that bay, and the historic window configuration was restored at the first floor. However, the material was modern. The current infill is all painted aluminum, as can be seen in the existing conditions photos. So this is that bay where previous doors were removed and modern infill at the first floor windows was installed and loading dock was extended. Existing non-historic brick and stucco infill at the cellar level remains today. So the purpose of this proposed design is to really activate this Cortlandt Alley facade, to introduce a new main retail entry to a separate retail tenant at the first floor, and to provide some natural light into the cellar retail space along Cortlandt Alley. So we looked to the context for precedent along Cortlandt Alley and along this portion of Broadway. At the top, we can see tall, 10-foot tall doors at 20 Cortlandt Alley, as well as decorative metal grillage panels. So this is just a couple doors down on Cortlandt Alley. Along Broadway, we noted several instances of multi-light clear story windows at the cellar levels. And the remainder of Cortlandt Alley is really, we noted this street facade or condition is really much less formal than the Broadway facades of these buildings, with a lot of back entrances, loading docks, a lot of variety in the door heights and sizes, some located at the sidewalk level, some at the loading dock level, and some added over time to allow for egress or access. Just quickly, these photos are a bit hard to decipher, but we did, before pursuing any design options, we did confirm that there's no historic fabric remaining below the sidewalk. In fact, we believe that this was originally an open areaway at the sidewalk, so there would not have been any vault lights, and there's no evidence of any historic infill between the cast iron columns at the cellar level. Existing and proposed elevations along the ground floor at Cortlandt Alley. Our area of work is focused just at the southern portion, but the building extends a few more bays to the north. Existing condition at the top. Currently a set of double doors at the southernmost bay. Those serve as egress doors. And existing non-historic infill at the cellar level, which we are proposing to remove and replace with clear story windows where windows are possible to allow light into the cellar level. New decorative panels at the two center bays and a new primary retail entry door at the northernmost bay of this portion. So an enlarged elevation of the existing condition. The areas of removal are highlighted in red. Again, the areas at the cellar are all non-historic infill. The window at the first floor in this bay is non-historic and was installed under a previous C of A application. The only portion of historic fabric being removed would be the spandrel panel and loading dock at the northernmost bay. And the proposed condition, taller entry doors for the retail tenant at the first floor. New multi-light clear story windows into the cellar tenant space and decorative metal grills to obscure any louvers behind at the two center bays. I do want to, sure.
Sorry. How tall are your new doors?
They are tall. They are 10 foot 10.
And how tall is the door to the left?
It's 7 feet.
Okay. And last, in terms of your precedents, were there any of the, I missed some of that. Were there any of the low windows that were just open glazing without bars or anything, or were they all?
Oh, yes, sir. The precedent at Broadway did have bars. I think that they're
Mostly, pictures that I remember seeing were mostly protected.
actually can't make this out, but there are some some windows at the cellar level at I believe that's the Cortlandt Alley facade of the building on the corner of White Street. And I do want to point out the signage is a bit of a placeholder at the moment as we're working with, there's no tenant in place at the moment. So we're working with staff to make sure that all the signage proposed will conform to LPC rules.
Okay.
Just existing and proposed first floor plan, the current retail space extends through from street to street. We're proposing to subdivide and allow for a separate entry at Cortlandt Alley. And I do want to, we did discuss with staff the possibility of locating the new entry door at the bay where there was no historic fabric at the loading dock area. However, since we're really only providing access from Cortlandt Alley, we need to provide 2 remote points of egress for this retail space. So locating the door in that bay would be too close to the other existing secondary egress. And then cellar level, just to show this is going to be a separate retail space. So we're trying to provide as much light as we can to this basement area. Existing typical wall section at the typical window bay showing removal of the non-historic brick infill and replacement with clear story window or decorative grille panel to obscure any louvers required behind. And section through the bay where we're introducing a new entry door lowering a portion of the first floor with 10-foot-10 tall doors and transom above. And some details of the proposed entry door to the left, transom, and clerestory windows. We are proposing a recessed panel at the new entry door, thicker transom bars to try to reduce the amount of glazing. And all proposed infill is proposed to be painted aluminum to be consistent with the previous work. And finally, existing condition and proposed condition.
Thank you. Any questions, commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Hopper Smith.
The painted aluminum, you said to be consistent with what?
With the current infill that exists at the first floor windows. All these windows that exist today were part of a previous application and were replaced as aluminum.
Got it. Okay, Commissioner Shamir Baran, did you have a question? Oh, I thought you had one as well. Anyone else?
Well, one question,
Yes.
the oversized doors. The reason for that is because just to
I'm sorry,
emphasize the
the
entrance.
reason for the size of the doors?
Yeah.
There's no specific tenant in place, but the owners are talking to gallery type tenants that may have large items that need to come in and out.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, I think we'll move to public testimony. We may have more after that. Christabel Goff.
Christabel Goff, reading for the Victorian Society. The Victorian Society in New York supports most aspects of this proposal, which in general retains historic infill on this facade and makes changes necessary for a new retail use in a sensitive way. We suggest, however, that the pair of historic upper sashes to be removed at the new entrance be retained in place of the proposed transom, preserving this material and a sense of the original configuration. If a sign can't be accommodated within the multiple lights, it can be foregone at this location, given the proposed blade signs also proposed. Regarding those, we think 36 inches is much too wide and one sign is enough unless there is more than one tenant. Such signs will quickly overwhelm this narrow street and obscure the buildings. Finally, we urge that the doors be made of equal sized leaves. If there isn't enough space within the opening for each leaf to meet accessibility standards, then the pair can use electric door operators to open both leaves together. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? All right, and I'll note for the record that Manhattan Community Board recommends denial of the signage scheme and approval of the rest of the application. And I know that you're going to be working with the staff on a signage scheme that will meet our rules for a staff level approval. So that's not part of this application. Okay, would you like to respond to the comments we've heard?
I couldn't hear the comment about an actuator.
Equal size.
I see. Okay.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay.
We can certainly look into that.
Okay. All right. I mean, the commission has also approved asymmetrical double doors to address this issue as well. So And then there was other I think the other comment was about keeping the upper sashes as the transom area. But they all have a transom above the double hung windows, right? So you'd just be
Correct.
keeping.
Correct. So we are
four-part
maintaining that,
window.
that top transom. The other transom would be replaced. I mean, the other windows are double hung, so we just felt it wasn't
Right, and then if you
really
kept the
true to
top,
that configuration to maintain that.
and it would be a 4-paned
Right.
configuration, which may relate to the windows, but not necessarily to a traditional transom. Okay. All right, any other final questions? No, okay.
I have one quick
Yes.
question. And why is it that the other door, unless I didn't read the plan correctly, could the other door, the one on the left, have been used for the entry to the retail? The door that sort of exists?
The door that exists is actually being used for the entry to the cellar retail space, and it serves as egress for other floors.
I see. So, okay, so not for the retail. Got it. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Right, Commissioner Gopin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And as was presented, this is a 3-block building that faces Broadway and has a rear more utilitarian facade that faces Cortlandt Alley, which is sort of typical of these 3-block buildings, where the back faces a street that had more functional kind of service character to it. And as a result, the applicant has shown us that Cortlandt Alley has a variety of conditions, some historic and some adapted over time. And part of the reason for the varying doors that exist is because when the 3-block buildings go through, the floor level is at a point above the street, but not high enough for a door. So the doors have kind of been accommodated in different ways, including with approvals from this commission. So with that as context, we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Jefferson?
Yes. I think the proposal is almost okay. My issue is really the doorway, and the grid system that's there now seems to work beautifully with the upper windows, and they're very strong and bold. And by adding this 10-foot door, that grid is disturbed. And that bothers me because even though it's a subordinate street, it has a certain elegance to it, a certain proportion to it. And the lower portion, the metal grill, I think it's okay, but I'm not quite sure why part of it is glass and part of it is metal grill, and why should it not be consistent? Why should that fabric just not be a clear, simple, consistent fabric? And in terms of the sign, the horizontal sign is fine. I think the blade sign is so odd, the proportion of it. I mean, maybe it should be longer. It just seems like it's an add-on to this facade. And although this is a back facade, there's a certain quality to it that I think we should try to keep.
And just the signage is going to be worked out to meet the rules for a staff level approval. So you don't need to focus on it. It's not actually part of this application.
Oh, okay. So why change the infill? That was one of my questions I asked. And make the infill more consistent with the fabric.
Okay. Commissioner Shamir Baron?
Yes. So I think that the fact that it was historically a loading dock is what kind of needs to continue to read here. And so I'm trying to figure out how that happens. And I think that and I understand that now that maybe the doors need to be different from one another because of the height shift. So, but I would say that this new door on the right should try at least to carry some of the datum lines even more than it is already doing of the loading dock, of that second kind of baffle, and that it probably should be symmetrically operable in order to recall this, what's going above, as well as that kind of that transom line should continue through the side where what says signage today. That the vertical line, that is, just as much as possible to allow for the thing to continue to draw from the original height indications of the loading dock and this kind of rear facade, quieter facade.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Halford Smith?
Yeah, I agree with some of the comments that have already been made. My biggest concern is the use of aluminum, which I think even though it was approved for the windows, it seems pretty alien now to be putting in a whole new aluminum storefront here. I think that it should be wood. And I agree with Adi's comments about the door. I'm wondering if the transom, the middle transom should also have a muntin. Is that what you said? Yeah. And then what Alvarado was pointing out at the cellar sort of clear story windows, I understand that the center ones have louvers and the other ones are windows, but I think it would read much more uniformly if that grill pattern went across all the windows at that level.
Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I agree with the comments of the previous commissioners.
I too agree with what has been said already. I think the grills should go on the lower level windows. I personally don't object to the tall doors, although I think that they probably won't work very well for very long. But I think it would have been better had they held the line of the continuity. The reason I think it's appropriate as it is that this street is a very variegated back of house kind of street, and they were not formal facades. So I think that this kind of variation would be appropriate. I think if others seem to feel that it should be improved, though, I think it would certainly be better to follow their lead.
Okay.
And I think the signage is okay as it is.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Bland?
I think it's really all been said, and I agree, particularly with the wood or metal clad wood for the doors.
Okay, so for those who have concerns about the height of the doors and the proportion, and just thinking about the datum line that they could pick up, so they're sort of picking up the meeting rail of the double hung windows. Were you thinking of matching the height of the other door, which I think? What were you?
I think the height is okay because if it lines up with the meeting rail, and if you lower it, it won't line up with anything. And I think if you lower it all the way down, it won't be
Too low, right? And okay, so I think though we still have I think we have not enough votes for the height of the door, if I'm counting right. I think you still are. You're okay with it? Right. Have a configuration. Okay, got it. Okay, so well, I'll go ahead. Let me make the motion on this one as an approval with modifications to work with the staff to consider the configuration of the door to relate to more of the datum lines and transom lines found, and also for grills across all of the clear story windows. Okay. So in the matter of docket number 21-08147, 408 to 410 Broadway in the Tribeca East Historic District, an Italianate style store loft building designed by Henry Engelbert and built circa 1866 to 1868. This is an application to modify openings, replace infill, and install signage. And I note that the signage is no longer part of this application and is being reviewed for a staff level permit. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Tribeca East Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications that the removal of one historic metal spandrel will not detract from the overall facade design, and the limited removal of masonry infill will not eliminate significant historic fabric. But the composition of the proposed elements at the entrance will be in keeping with the variety of infill found at the rear facades of buildings of this type, style, and age. That the proposed infill will feature horizontal alignments and with existing infill at the adjoining bays, helping to unify the overall composition. That the presence of entrance infill of different heights at this facade will be in keeping with the variety and utilitarian informality of infill at the bases of buildings throughout the alley. That the proposed windows and grills will be typical in placement and well scaled to the openings, and that the proposed finishes will be in keeping with the historic color palette of the building. However, I recommend that the applicant continue to work in consultation with the staff to study the proposed material for the infill, considering a wood or metal clad wood, and that the configuration of the door and details of the doors better relate to the historic character of the Cortlandt Alley facade in terms of the datum lines and the configuration of datum lines, including a vertical mullion in the transom, and looking at the door configuration with staff. Okay. Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
and Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Motion carries 8 in favor, none opposed.
Okay, so it's approved with those modifications. Thank you. All right. And we'll move to the next item.
Okay, we're now going to move to item number 5, LPC 21-01775, application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 194, lot 14, 36 Walker Street in the Tribeca East Historic District. This is an Italianate style store and loft building built in 1859 to 60. And the application is to construct bulkheads and a pergola, remove steps, replace storefront infill, and install a cornice.
So please go ahead.
Thank you for allowing me to present to you. My name is James Seisakorn. I'm with the Correct Collaborative here in Tribeca. So as Corey mentioned, our renovation takes place at 36 Walker. Just to give you a little bit of context, 36 Walker is 3 doors down from the corner of Church Street and Walker Street. Right now, it's in a bit of a state of disrepair. And obviously, we're looking to renovate the exterior as well as do quite an extensive interior renovation. I did want to focus on this image first. It's the tax photo from 1940. And you can see that 36 Walker and 38 Walker were built approximately at the same time or within 2 years of each other. So by the same owner. So the intent we imagine was that the 2 buildings look very similar. Here's an axonometric of really our proposed interventions on the exterior. As I said, on the interior, we're planning an extensive renovation that includes new egress stairs and a new elevator. Part of what will allow this new elevator to function is the modification of the storefront, primarily the western bay, to eliminate the current stairs that are there. If I can point, I don't know if. Oh, sorry. To eliminate the current stairs that are there, to provide at-grade entrance to a lobby. And that lobby will provide access to the new egress stair and elevator, which will go all the way up to the roof. And as Corey mentioned, we are doing a roof scope at the roof, which I'll discuss later. Here is an elevation of both 36 Walker and 38 Walker. And this just is to demonstrate kind of the symmetry of the two facades. And our intention really is to model our storefront renovation with 38, the direction or the spirit that 38 Walker was renovated and approved by Landmarks in the past. This quickly is just to show that we're working with Landmarks also to replace the rear facade windows, and the existing top of the rear, which includes a gutter, will remain intact. So this image shows really the condition, the poor condition of 36 Walker. And this image on the upper left-hand corner shows the stairs that we're hoping to remove. Right now, there are currently doors that are behind a rolling gate that is broken. We can't actually raise it any further, but the doors, there are no doors on the inside. They've been completely sheetrocked over. You can see, just to highlight the renovation at 38 Walker is quite simply done. They've got simple infill of windows between existing cast iron columns, and they proposed a new cornice, a fiberglass cornice, which we're also trying to emulate. Here, just more detailed drawings of the scope of our work. Obviously, you can see the taller door that provides access to the new lobby and the new cornice. And again, we have a decorative grille, which we're keeping and we're going to restore. All of the details we're working with staff level to. I just wanted to point out in the upper left-hand corner, you can see the two different colors that we'll be using. They're really replicas or as close of a match as possible to the storefront at 38 Walker. The infill, the window infill, will be a darker gray, whilst the cast iron columns and the new cornice will be in a lighter gray to evoke the idea of stone. Again, more details of the storefront. And here I just wanted to point out right now, the reason why we're lowering this lobby or creating this new lobby is that there is a grade differential of 26 inches. So to provide ADA accessibility, we are providing this at-grade entrance that will allow visitors and tenants to access the retail space, which is 26 inches above grade via a two-sided elevator. This diagram shows kind of the condition more clearly in axiometric. So the other component I think that is really of note is the fact that we are matching the cornice at 38 Walker. As I said, it is a fiberglass cornice, and we have the exact model which we'll replicate, and we're also replicating the seams to be identical to those shown at 38 Walker. Some more details of the cornice. And here, with the roof scope right now, there really is very limited scope of appurtenances on our roof. We've got a small skylight to the east and a roof hatch to the west. All of the other bulkheads that you see are on other adjoining properties. This view, which is the sidewalk elevation or the street elevation of Walker Street facing the north, just shows the amount of structures that are on existing roofs. There are many bulkheads, and it's a feature that you see a lot in this particular historic district. So what we're proposing at the roof, as I said, are two different bulkheads. One, which is an elevator bulkhead that provides access to the roof amenities, and a stair bulkhead, which provides egress. Towards the rear, we've got a mechanical screen, two levels of terrace that are surrounded by planters, which are in fiberglass, as you can see below in the images. We've also got a pergola, which is rendered in oak. The flooring of the rooftop space will be mostly a concrete paver, as shown in the image, and for 20% of that will be Ipe siding. The siding will also relate to the decking and the fencing that encircle the roof. Towards the front of the roof, facing Walker Street, we are required to have a glass guardrail, and that will be immediately behind the planters that face Walker Street. Here are views from the street. This is looking down towards the west from Walker Street. And originally, our mock-up shows a more extensive scope. And based on our conversations with staff and also at CB1, we decided to pare down the pergola. So using computer-aided modeling, we were able to determine that we've reduced visibility to almost nothing from this vantage point. You don't see our pergola anymore, or you won't. This is a view looking from Church Street towards the northeast. And again, we had a much more prominent pergola in the past, which has now been reduced based on comments that we received from CB1. And again, same issue. Again, this is a little bit closer from Church Street and Walker Street, the corner, but we've reduced the scope of the pergola to limit visibility entirely from this view. Again, same view, just a slightly different perspective. Again, the visibility of the pergola no longer exists. And I do have plans and sections that I can go over if you'd like.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, let's see if we have testimony. Christabel Goff.
Christabel Goff for the Victorian Society. The Victorian Society in New York supports the proposed alterations to the storefront and rooftop. The storefront appears to follow generally the configuration of those shown, though not very clearly in the DEX photos, uses traditional materials and detailing, and will bring storefront floors facade into harmony with that of the matching building next door. The rooftop additions, while large and fairly visible from Walker Street, won't be seen in direct relationship to the front facade, and we do not believe they will detract from the appearance of the building or the district. However, they have a procedural comment, which I think is worth noticing. When the committee first looked at this presentation, there were slides illustrating proposed window replacement at the upper floors and indicating that the work was to be approved by staff. Those slides subsequently disappeared from the presentation. This leads us to make two comments. The first is that it would be helpful to those reviewing proposals for testimony if an indication were given of the time and date of any changes to the presentation after initial posting. The second comment concerns changes to the historic 2/2 arch-headed windows on the upper floors of the front facade. These windows, as is typical of the style and period, have a character-defining feature featuring wide beaded central muntins. If indeed the staff approval to replace these windows with new windows having narrow center muntins is allowed or mandated by the window rules, then there is something very wrong with those rules.
Thank you. Simeon Bankoff.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Simeon Bankoff, Historic Districts Council. HDC supports this proposal, but asks for some modifications to be made in order to the proper standard of appropriateness. We see from the drawings that the applicant may have chosen to use fiberglass for the storefront cornice to mirror its neighbor 38 Walker Street. And that was as presented in the presentation, which seems to have done the same. However, we wondered if this material was approved by LPC as, being so close to the street level, it would not seem to fall under the amended LPC rules for replacement materials. If so, HTC believes that previous approvals should not always be a standard for future approvals, as the Landmarks Commission is constantly evolving and improving its judgment of its approvals, and the availability and cost of appropriate materials has also improved over time. We believe the proposal should be looked at with the highest standards of architectural and historic preservation currently available. Therefore, we urge Landmarks to request using metal on the cornice, as is indicated on slide L4, LPC 4 in the presentation. Additionally, the actual storefront design itself seems slightly visually discordant in that the horizontal planes of the door panes and the transoms do not fully align. We strongly recommend adjusting the bottom elements of the transoms so that they visually align and removing the 2/2 configuration on the middle door so that it could better align with the elongated accessible entrance to its left. These small alterations would quiet down the design much to its betterment. Finally, with regard to the rooftop proposal, we recommend pushing the pergola back even just a little further on the rooftop so that it's not as visible and prominent as it had appeared, at least in the presentation that we saw on Friday.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 1 recommends approval of the application on the condition that there is no original ground floor decoration removed and discarded, and that the pergola is not visible from the street level east on Walker Street. So I'll ask you to respond to the comments, and I think you did already address the community board's concern. But before that, I just want to respond about the windows. Windows may have been shown on the drawings when they were originally submitted, and if the applicant chooses to match the historic windows and seek a staff level permit, that may be why they were removed. But I assure you that the rules would require the front windows match the historic windows, and the staff would not issue a permit unless they met the rules. Corey, is there anything you wanted to add about that?
No, that's correct. In the particular muntin that was pointed out is something that staff is working with this applicant on to make sure it is the wider articulated muntin, not just a skinny, narrow one.
Okay, all right, great. Okay, would you like to respond to the other comments about the configuration of the door and window and well, the pergola, you can address that again, but I know you've pushed that out of view.
We did actually take into account quite seriously what CB1 had recommended, which was to really limit the height and the protrusion of the pergola into towards the south. And by eliminating about 4 feet in height and about 4 feet in depth, we were able to make the pergola disappear from Walker Street from multiple vantage points. And I guess in regards to the door, we will work with staff level to find a happy medium that works both with your concerns and I guess with LPC staff level concerns.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Just one. How tall is the door now, the new door?
The new door.
Yeah, the one to the left.
So the new door is 11'10", and the center door is 9'7". So there's a 2 feet differential.
So and they're proposing it that grade for barrier-free access. There was also a comment about the fiberglass cornice, if you want to address that.
There was the reason why we chose to emulate 38 Walker, the fiberglass cornice specifically, was that it actually was specified by AF, or it was custom designed with AF cornice, and they pointed to the exact a model that they used. So, our intention was to try to be as true as possible to that renovation, although we can work with staff level to find a solution that might be in metal if that is, again, addresses your concerns and is also cost effective. So.
Okay, all right. Any final questions? Yes, Commissioner Holford Smith.
Do we know if that fiberglass cornice was approved by Landmarks?
That was approved by Landmarks, and after careful working with the staff on the location of the seams. And so Corey, you can give us a little background about how the commission has approved cornices.
Sure, and that particular approval was, 10 or 11 years ago now, so it predates the current set of rules, which are slightly different and more conservative with some materials, including one such as this. But in general, when staff does review fiberglass, particularly on a cornice, if it's a heavily bracketed cornice, we look to locate the seams behind the brackets or to align with joints so that they're not as conspicuous, rather than putting them right in the middle of a flat area. So that would be the same case here, and I do think that's what happened at the building next door. But otherwise, the joints are filled flush and painted over. So in this particular case, they're just looking to match that exactly with the same profile that was already created for that building.
And the cornice is a continuous cornice. It isn't, there isn't a break in the middle between.
It's continuous.
Yes. It's continuous. Okay. So a different material may age or weather differently, too, I suppose. Okay. Right. Any other questions? All right. Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Chen, would you second it?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion. So at the ground floor, the proposal is to remove non-historic infill and do new doors based on the doors at 38 Walker Street, the neighboring building, and to extend the fiberglass cornice. The proposal is for the bulkheads at the roof and the pergola, which has been reduced in visibility in response to community board concerns. So Commissioner Schmidt-Barron, would you go ahead?
Sure. Thank you. I understand that the sort of the two sides, the building that we're looking at now and its kind of twin on the other side, are a little bit different in that they're removing the stair. But I do think that, back to this datum thing, that they should pull up or create another line, whether it's a mullion or it's a thicker piece that carries the door, the kind of the other doors second level across, so that we can read that continuous relationship of window to bulkhead to street. And I think beyond that, I think the pergola is fine where it is. I guess I still don't entirely understand when we require metal cornice, and especially in a case like this where it is relatively close to the street. So, and I don't know that we have the room to shift here, but it's still an outstanding question for me.
Okay. All right. I mean, I think the proximity to the street dictates whether it can be done at staff level or not. And if it's closer to the street, it comes to a public hearing, and depending on the cornice type and conditions, the commission has approved it in the past. Corey.
Yeah, and in large part, it also depends on if the original material can be determined to be cast iron versus a sheet metal that sort of opens the door to different substitute materials that can be used. But just as a reminder too, I mean, this is voluntary work. They don't have to put it back at all. And so they're asking for the fiberglass that, from you all at the commission level. Staff level rules would already allow them to do it in sheet metal or cast iron to match the historic.
Okay.
I think in general, this is acceptable. A little concerned about the precedent of the fiberglass, but I understand that we don't really know what was there before. So matching what's existing seems to be appropriate. I'm okay with the large door, although I think it's a very tall door. It's going to have problems with it, but I think that the comment of testimony about the details of the storefront, that they should be working with staff on that, because it seems very flat, which may not really be what the original profiles of that storefront were. Like the transom bar may have had a raised profile.
Okay.
I think the rooftop additions are appropriate.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I think that the pergola and the rooftop creations are appropriate in the context of other similar creations on the same block, really. So I'm okay with that. I agree with previous commissioners that applicants should work with the staff on the details of the infill and to make sure they're historically appropriate. And I think perhaps that large window should be broken up in some fashion, as Commissioner Barron suggested.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
No disagreement to what others have said. The only thing I would add is that we have seen in situations like this where you have this monster door that there have been cases where we've seen double transoms. So I think that, you might explore that if functionality becomes an issue.
Okay. Commissioner Chan.
Same here. I'm glad they're making it more accessible for the ADA.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Bland.
I think the double transom idea might be the resolution. I think a door this proportion, it's going to be a problem. I didn't understand where the fence is on the back on the roof. Is it right on the property, on the parapet, or is it pushed back?
It's not, it's actually set in and it's higher because our, obviously our mechanical equipment is on dunnage. So there's
Okay.
about.
All right, if you're going to say more, I'll have to open up the hearing. So I think, does that answer the question?
I think so.
Okay,
Sorry.
It just should be back from the parapet, not on the parapet.
back from the parapet. Okay. Commissioner Jefferson.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate. I think the bulkhead is acceptable. The cornice is fine. I think that the data line at the base should be explored, and perhaps the bottom piece of the door would be a material. So that make that datum line strong.
Okay.
Would make that facade better.
All right. So I think you're still open question about the cornice. Are you comfortable making a motion with the cornice? Otherwise, I can just have Anne make the motion. Okay, all right. So we'll make a motion to approve it with modifications that they continue to work with the staff on the datum lines and configuration of the doors and the details of the doors.
In the matter of LPC 2101775, that's 36 Walker Street, Tribeca East Historic District, an Italianate style store and loft building built in 1859 to 60. The application is to construct bulkheads and a pergola, remove steps, replace storefront infill, and install a cornice. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Tribeca East Historic District. And I also note that a certificate of no effect 113358 was issued on October 15th, 2010, approving the installation of a fiberglass cornice and other work at the adjoining matching building at 38 Walker Street. I recommend approval, finding that the work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the modifications will provide barrier-free access to the building in the least intrusive manner. The proposed entrance infill will be in keeping with entrances historically found at the building of this type, style, and age in terms of materials, details, finishes, and composition of elements, that the horizontal alignments of the proposed infill will help unify the overall composition and will restore the transom line, that the proposed cornice will match the historic cornice in terms of placement, dimensions, details, and finish, and will match the fiberglass cornice previously installed at the adjacent matching building, that the cornice will be painted and its joints sanded, and thereby helping the fiberglass material to closely recall the metal cornice and not to call attention to the material, that the proposed rooftop bulkhead and pergola will be seen only from public thoroughfares in select views over a lot line facade and in views at a distance against a background of taller buildings. That the bulkheads and pergola will be set back from the front facade and be of size which will not detract from the prominence of the historic cornice in views from the front. That the bulkheads and pergola will feature simple profiles and designs typical materials and neutral finishes, further helping them remain a discrete presence, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the Tribeca East Historic District. I recommend as well that the applicant work with the staff to align the datum lines at the doors, at the ground floor doors and bulkhead and transoms, and work on the details of the new doors, especially to refine them.
And Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
I second it.
Thank you. John?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland. Aye. Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
The motion carries 8 in favor, none opposed.
Okay, so that's approved with those modifications. Please continue to work with the staff. And we're about an hour, almost an hour behind schedule, so we're going to break for lunch now. And we'll come back at 10 after 1, between, well, let's say 1:15, and we will resume the afternoon session, starting with item number 6.